Hey, Grandmasters, Mike Amori, WCA. Week 7 update, 4 o'clock. Rusa is coming in next week for the simul. So I'm hoping this video can prepare you guys a little bit for what's coming. You will most likely not see the opening that you're going to see in the game, but you will be, hopefully, confused by what we're doing. That's our job, is to use our experience together to create positions that are difficult for you to navigate. Whenever you're playing chess and you're confused, we always try to teach to pay very close attention to the pawn structure. So I know that you look at the checks and captures first. That's understood at this point. But as you get better, you still have to accumulate cues that help you along the path. So if you're playing us next week, pay very close attention to your pawn structure and our pawn structure. It really will help you, or it will indicate where your pieces should go. Okay, enough of my babble. Now, we looked at Sunday. This is not the first time we've done it at the WCA, but it is the first time with this group. We looked at what's known as the Dzindzi Indian Defense, which looks completely chaotic from the black side when you think about what black's first moves are. So after the move c5, we have this kind of Benoni structure if white pushes past, and which they did in the game that you're going to see. And then at some point, if black gets this pawn to d6, this is sometimes known as a Benoni structure. However, in this opening, in the Dzindzi Indian, this is named after Roman Dzindzihashvili, he kind of advocates trading off the dark squared bishop. And I got looks from some of you like I was insane showing this to you, because think about what black is doing. Black is weakening their dark squares by fianchettoing, right? But we all deal with that because we have a dark squared bishop. Until now. Yeah, that's right. Black trades it off, which seems just insane to trade such a beautiful bishop off like that. So white naturally takes, and then what does black do? They follow up with another pawn move on a light square, further weakening the dark squares. So let's say you got this position at the simul or something like it that looked completely confusing to you. Talk to the pawns. Why would a grandmaster, and we're actually going to look at a grandmaster handling the black pieces here, why would a grandmaster trade off their only developed piece, a dark squared bishop, and then weaken his dark squares? It seems counterintuitive. But if you look at the pawns carefully enough, you begin to realize that there's this nice blockade here. You know, there's one pawn on c5. And once I get a pawn to d6, I am pretty much locking these pawns in place for the foreseeable future. I can break that, but white can't break me. You know, I could play e5 at some point. I could play b5, b4 at some point. White cannot do that. So when black feels the time is right, they will try to break the board open. Now, they're going to be very careful about that because white has two bishops. So the idea of the Dzindzi Indian is to create a pawn structure that actually inhibits those bishops, slows them down. And that's why black plays this way. Okay? Now, the game we're going to look at did not start with this move order, but I want to show you a couple of things from here. Over the years, believe it or not, black had a positive score. White has caught up recently, obviously, with the computers these days. But in the old days, you know, black was doing really well with this because I think it confused white more than anything. One of white's sharpest ways to play against this is not to develop normally, but to play the move h4. And h4, there's no mystery about what h4 is designed to do. Just blast open the H file. So black has handled this the following way. Knight f6, continue with h5, no development at all, just open the H file, and now you have to worry about the pin here on the H file. So black plays rook g8, they trade pawns here, and then white plays queen a4, which is one of the main lines from this position. It kind of stops the d6 pawn from moving, and this is really annoying. I mean, you know, if you can't move that d pawn, it's hard to get your pieces out. I mean, where are they going to go? So black normally responds with king f7, and white had a reason for that. So it appears their queen is misplaced, but if you can get the black king here, then he's going to live on this side of the board where there's already an open H file. And from here, we're going to be playing a game of chess. Okay, so that's one of the ways to try to come after this opening. And again, I'll show it to you. It's with the move H4 right away. Now, if you were playing the white pieces, how might you find this move? So let's just take it back for a minute, right? Here's our position. Let me flip the board. Let's say you see this for the first time and you have absolutely no idea what to do with white. So what happens is most players just play standard developing moves, like in the game we're going to see. But as a WCA player, you might spot that this pawn structure can be broken. If I can get a white pawn here, and some of my students at the class have taught this trick, or I've been taught this trick, to throw a pawn into the middle of the chain, either to get this pawn to move, or to exchange it, to weaken everything, or to let me exchange, opening up the H file. So I'm pretty confident that you guys might find a move like this. What would stop you from playing this would be, well, I don't have any pieces out, and I'm playing on the side of the board. Okay, so how do you justify that? Black doesn't have any pieces out. So, you know, you're not going to get punished. And again, don't forget the color of your uniform. You're playing white. So you can afford to be fancy or be creative just as much as black can, if not more. So when you get these interesting different positions, if you're playing with a clock and you have time, please do me a favor. Define the problem. Talk to yourself. Hey, I've never seen this before. It looks odd. I've never seen anyone trade their only developed piece and then follow up with a pawn move. If you're inputting information that seems a little odd, then maybe an odd way to play is the best response. Because you're in a chaotic position, maybe you play a chaotic move. You know, in most openings, you're not playing pawn h4 on move 6. But in this one, it's really justified. Okay? So keep that in mind. So let's look at the actual game. d4 takes me some time to spin. Oh man, I did it great. Isn't that amazing how I can just turn the board without spilling the pieces? Very proud of myself. Now let's look at how these guys got into the game. There is a grandmaster named Zdenko Kozul who's playing black. He's from Croatia. And the way I pronounced his name, heaven only knows what I said. He didn't play the Dzindzi Indian. He played pawn to d6 on move 1. And I like this move for black. Sometimes if white plays a move like c4, then we can play e5. And I know Ben in this class loves this position. He likes to play without the queens and play this queenless middle game. That's a possibility. I don't know what would have happened if white played this way. So white decided knight f3, and then black plays in like King's Indian fashion. He's going to fianchetto. Now c4, bishop g7, knight c3, and guess what? c5. And there's our position. White decided to push through, and then comes the trade of that beautiful bishop, followed by f5. Okay? So that's just a way to get into our position from a different move order. Okay? So after f5, white handled this game, and white is at 2300, by the way. So it's not a beginner playing white. So I have no idea. The game was played in 2011. I have no idea how much knowledge white had about this position, but I think white knew, maybe from experience, that this c-pawn will get attacked at some point by this queen, which is a very, very common theme. So he kind of took care of that in advance and played queen to c2. and black continued with queen a5. I know it looks strange to have her over there, but the pressure that you get on this diagonal is almost always worth the trouble of having your queen, I guess some people might say, slightly misplaced. Okay, pawn to e3 was played, and now knight f6. Okay, now let me turn on a couple of highlights. There is that pawn structure again. You gave white the bishop pair on move 4. Think about that for a moment. On move 4, you gave white the bishop pair. But if you played this opening and you've had experience with it, you would know that the pawn structure that you gave white does not help their bishops. I mean, I would recommend pausing the video, or better yet, if you could put this on a real chessboard and put white in front of you, and you will begin to see that it's not that clear how those bishops are going to play. Okay, so, I mean, what else to do? Bishop to d3, developing the bishop, getting ready to castle. Knight b to d7. Why the knight and not the bishop? Because the knight has a reason to come to d7 first, which you'll see on the next move. White castled, and it's knight to b6. And the idea of knight b6 is to now open up the bishop, and you see I highlighted this pawn green, is to pressure the c-pawn. Please keep in mind these c-pawns for white are doubled, so they are targets. In some openings like the Dzindzi Indian Defense, certain lines of the English, but more like Dzindzi lines, these pawns get doubled, and then you'll see this bishop sometimes come to a6 after a fianchetto to pressure that pawn. So black now has a target, and I don't know that it's a pawn black wants right away, because this bishop up here kind of looks like a big pawn, but I'm just kind of filling you in on some of the ideas in this opening. Okay, white to play. A little shift. Now, knight d2 could be an attacking move, correct? So we're not sure what white is up to. Are they going to play f3 followed by e4? Please don't miss that this is attacking your queen. So if she didn't have a square, you could be in trouble. A cool thing about this opening, and I have played this a few times in my life, and I remember being kind of scared the first few times with my queen, but you can almost never get more than one piece to attack that queen. There's just no room for it. So it's kind of cool. Like a lot of times white will just line up and try to kill your queen, and you're like, no way, you can't get to her. So white says in advance, how about a queen trade? If the queens come off, if we take and take, it's just a chess game. That's what it is again. I still think difficult for white. I mean, there's pressure on this c-pawn, the backward c-pawn. You can try to open up the center, but I think with the queens off, black is like okay here. So after queen a4, white just said, no, I don't want to trade on your terms. I'll trade on my terms. I don't mind if you take me. You can fix my pawn structure, and then we can continue playing chess. Very interesting moment. Here, I kept going through games that I thought were instructive for you guys. And at this point, I really like black's move a lot, both as a player and as a teacher. First, as a player, black actually breaks here. And as a player, I like when you play moves that not only create play somewhere on the board, but kind of tell your opponent, hey, that's right, I just broke in the middle of the board with my king on e8, and you're the one with the two bishops. And I like that as a teacher because it's a good time for you to ask, is it time to break the rules for black? Because they are technically asking for it, right? Their queen is offside, way over here on this side of the board. Their king is in the middle, and now you just play e5? Is that justified? Well, the answer is yes, because, again, this pawn structure is not so easy to change. So even if some lines open up in the middle, I mean, black is only one move away from castling. I think you can play it, right? Now, if you don't take this en passant, my French accent not so good. If you don't take it, then you have to deal with this blob of pawns. All of you are too young to know the original Blob movie. I think Steve McQueen was in it. None of you listening to this have any idea who that is, except for Fred, of course. Yeah, it's like a blob. You see, it's just like advancing. Do you want to play against this pawn center? So white did not. So then just took, and now the light square bishop comes out. Okay, rook e1. Watch the highlights. I put them on right away. Go back. Rook e1, highlight. So why is it there right away? Because it's lined up with your king. And like most GMs and IMs and masters, the second something lines up with their king or queen, they make an adjustment. Get the king out of the middle. The black rooks are connected. Black has some weaknesses, but because white has bishops, they're not so easy to get to. Okay, bishops to c2. Again, lining up with the queen. There could be some tricks in this position. White just backs up and putting pressure on the c2 square. e4, a good move, attempting to open up the game and give black a chance to go wrong, or at least open the game when they're not ready. Again, a very instructive moment in the game. I thought black may have gone for this pawn right away, thinking they could win something here on c4. And as I started to calculate this, it felt okay to just take the pawn. And then I looked on ChessBase, and the computer engine that I used to check some of the tactics, it turns out other people in the world were looking at the same position. And the main moves that popped up were not the one played in the game until you give the computer enough time to think. And I found that very instructive. Most of the quicker moves were to take the pawn. Just make a trade in the center of the board, and then you can either take or not take on c4. But the move that was played by the grandmaster and ultimately the computer was the move rook h to e8. And I found this to be very instructive. The rook on e8 introduces a concept that you guys have all been taught, whether at the WCA or by your coaches. And it's the concept of what? What would you call that when you have a move like a rook in the corner and you bring it in? Yeah, it's called bringing in the last piece, and then giving the ball to white and say, okay, my entire army is mobilized. Now if we continue to battle in the middle, at least every piece I have is centralized and ready to play. I thought it was a great move. And now you give white a chance to maybe go wrong. White defends the c-pawn, and now black takes. Knight takes, and through these trades, knight takes e4 may not have been the best to go right away, but white blunders here and takes back with the rook. Now, if we go back, perhaps in this position, there's a stronger move than taking with the knight. I don't know if you guys want to spend some time and try to find it, but I remember looking at bishop f5, which seems kind of odd, you know, but why? You can't take this knight. You guys see why bishop f5 creates a little more play? Yeah, there's an issue up here. There's a back rank issue. Okay, so I'll put a highlight on for you. That bishop. For the rest of your lives, whenever you're playing a game and you see that your opponent's queen's bishop, the queen bishop, is not out, and there's a rook that's not out, always look for tactics. It's amazing how often they come. So maybe bishop f5 would have given white a little bit more trouble, but nevertheless, he took. And taking with the bishop was the correct way to go, but white decided to take with the rook, and that got him in a little bit of trouble. Like d5 is really nasty. There's pins everywhere in this position, but black just played it straight away with bishop takes here on c4, winning a pawn, by the way. Very important pawn. There's a pin on the back rank. So after this trade, white took with the queen, setting up, a simple trap. You can't take the queen with the rook because you get mated. So to avoid losing a rook, white trades, but by doing so, it now sets up black for, I don't know, is this an end game or still a middle game with the queens on the board? But this is a very favorable position, even though black allows white to get his piece out. So now white has everything developed, but this is a very favorable position. What would you play as black here? Pause your video. So rook e2 was played in the game. Again, the queen is protected by the knight. Pawn g3, setting an escape square. King c7. Can you guys see what I'm circling here, this entire mass on the queen side? When you study the endgame, you're going to hear that. Like, I have a whole mass of pawns and pieces here. The king, if he can help mobilize that mass, it's a very effective way to play. White knows that idea and is deciding to play on the king side. He's going to have to do something, and I found this to be very instructive. White goes in for an endgame now, helping white by connecting the pawns, but after a6, it sets up a defensive structure, so the rook's not going to play, and then you're telling white, okay, let's play this with me having an extra pawn. So here, rook gets hit, and back, not staying on the 7th rank, but coming back. And I think he's playing against this rook. You could have come to this rank, but maybe he didn't want to give this rook any counterplay to come in. I mean, you could grab some pawns, but if that white rook gets in and starts taking something here, then you have to be careful that if these pawns don't, if they start rolling, you may win something up here, but keep in mind that white has a bishop. So if the white rook got in and could help create a passed pawn over here, black naturally would do the same on this side. But your minor piece could at least sacrifice itself for a very far advanced pawn where this knight may not get over here as quickly to do the same thing. So I like black's move. He just pulls the rook back and now tells white no counterplay, at least not with your rook. So g4. And again, what is white doing? Just mobilizing what he has and his majority. He's got a 3-on-2. King c6, improving the king inside black's majority. King g2, supporting the mass. c4. Love these moves. Breaking up the white defensive structure. If you don't take, and you don't have to take, black will probably centralize the knight and attack the pawn. But in the game, white took, and the knight took back. f4. Again, pressing, but the problem is white is playing without their rook, which allowed rook e2 check, king f1, and now rook c2. And there's a threat here now. You have to watch out. Your g-pawn is hanging. If you play a move like bishop f6 to protect it, you're going to get checked, king somewhere, and then lose that middle pawn, and now you're really in hot water. You don't want to lose that pawn because these pawns are going nowhere now. So he instead just ignored it and played f5, trying to get a pawn rolling on that side of the board. And here, and also obviously the bishop controls the e3 square, and black just took, allowing black to take a second pawn, and now the game's over very quickly. f6, no counterplay. Right now that pawn is putting a little bit of heat on you. Back the knight up. There are no checks. Cover the f7 square. King e2. King d5. Again, supporting the pawn and at the same time stopping the white pawn. Rook f1. And I love the next move. Rook c7. No counterplay. Your plan is to surround this pawn eventually take it, and then you'll have these pawns mobilized and running. Okay, long video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. I did. So I'll see you at the simul. Maybe you can put some of this stuff to work.